Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my phantom thoughts. In this episode, I'm going to respond to voicemail call-ins from Jason, Joe, and Rich, and we're going to talk about world building in the world of the Tales of the Dragon Slayers. But up front, I just have a little quick question. I've run across a word very recently. I've run across it before, but I've run across it multiple times in probably the last few weeks. And it's spelled CHARGEN. And it's short for character generation. And it's just how you, the process, the mechanism you use, and following it to create characters. I've run across it in several podcasts and YouTube videos. And every time it's pronounced charge in. The people who are using the word pronounce it charge in. Like charging, just leaving the last G off in terms of pronunciation. But given that it's short for character generation, shouldn't it be Cargin? Chargin or Cargin? What do you think? Call in, send me an email, drop me a tweet, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And now, let's get on with the podcast.
Hey, Jason here. Enjoyed the latest episode. You're the second person to recommend the Phil Reed's hex deck. Actually, Tim Shorts over at Gothridge Manor unboxed them recently and talked about them. And I picked the PDF up after he did that. Really good product, really interesting. The other one you talked about also sounds pretty great. As far as your solo play today on the episode, it's a shame Sir Gus wasn't by himself, because that would have been a perfect opportunity where the orcs totally outclassed in weapon combat could have tried to overbear him, and you could have got into the unarmed combat rules for AD&D if he was alone. But it would have been silly for them to try to do that here, just because once they got in the grappling with them, it would have been tough with the other party members hacking at them. But yeah, 2 or 3 of them could have tried to take him down in unarmed combat pretty easily. So that's maybe not easily, but it was an option. So maybe in a future podcast that'll happen, or a future segment in the adventure it'll happen. Take care.
Thank you for the call, Jason. Yeah, it could easily have ended up with some type of overbearing ending up taking place during the combat. The section of the dungeon that the party is in has a lot of rooms and corridors that are just open corridors without any doors. It's chambers, and some of them are not chambers and not rooms, and a wide corridor that's about 20 feet wide, which the party with only 5 people couldn't really occupy. The orcs would be able to kind of get around them, or they could go around another way in the passageway. The dice didn't roll that way. The orcs, that's kind of how I've been deciding what people will do when I get into the battle. If they notice what an advantage or not is test against their intelligence, and of course, orcs not being that intelligent, the roll wasn't sufficient for them to do that. And eventually I'm probably have to look at some denizens, if they've been there established in the dungeon while, that they know the area, not worry about rolling, that they would have a plan. I don't think the orcs have been there long enough for that, though. But yeah, that would have been interesting. I have leafed through the overbearing rules. I'll have to take another look through those someday when it comes into play, so that I can play out that scenario. Didn't happen this time. Things went the party's way, and they had a good plan. I try to play them with a good plan, because I think the adventurers should be the ones with the best plan, but not necessarily a perfect plan when you're doing solo. And that's why I try to leave a lot up to the dice. And the hex deck, the hex deck looks very interesting. I'll have to check out Gothridge Manor. That's the first time I've heard them mentioned. I always like it when I listen to your podcast or you call in, because I always learn about things and people that I don't know about. So thank you for that, and thank you for calling, and thank you for listening.
Hey, Phantom, just getting into your latest episode, feeling hexy. And I wanted to say, on the heels of what I just heard Jason say, I also really, really enjoyed your RPG a day and how you put it together and built the world. I love that kind of stuff. One of my favorite world building exercises I ever did was when I was running my last campaign, Wheeler Woe. I did a thing on Twitter. There was a thing going around where it was, for every like, I'll tell you a fact about the world. And that post ended up getting like over 100 likes. And so I kept having to come up with these new little tidbits about the world, nothing longer than a tweet. And it was such a really intense, awesome world building exercise, the likes I've never done before or since. And the fact that you kind of did a thing a lot like that, it was just awesome, man. Really, really, really good stuff, dude. Anyway, back to the episode. Take it easy. Peace out.
Thanks for the call, Joe. What you were doing, what you did on Twitter, that did sound pretty intense. I know doing what I did for RPG a day, I was doing a lot of it in batches, kind of coming up with them in a little notebook during the week, and then recording them all on the weekends. And it was pretty intense on its own. It was also very challenging trying to produce things that were a little different but kind of related, and how to phrase them and not make them be, an endless novel. So that was sort of a challenge that I enjoyed as well. And if you enjoy world building, you're probably going to like a lot of the other parts of this episode, because I'm talking a lot about world building and the world in this one. So thank you for the call, and thanks for listening.
Hey, Phantom, this is Rich. I got the Hex Kit as well, and man, that thing is gorgeous, right? It's so pretty, and it comes with the little wooden pieces that are cool. As soon as I opened it, I saw those wooden pieces, and I was like, damn, these are roads. Wait a minute, this is Settlers. Why didn't any of us take Settlers of Catan apart? It's got like 3 or 4 expansions. There's probably 60 tiles in that thing. Why haven't we been using that to make hex crawls with? Why has Games Omnivorous come up with these this hex set that is amazing? Don't get me wrong, it's amazing. I love it. It's beautiful, good stuff. My only complaint is they said the old stuff would fit in the box, and while the hexes kind of will fit, the big boards that came with it didn't. But yeah, I love it. Can't wait to start playing with it.
Hey, Rich, you are absolutely right. That is some Settlers of Catan action going on there. That didn't even piece together in my mind when I opened it up. And the hexes are gorgeous. The box, I don't think I even talked about the box when I was talking about the kit, but the box, for everybody out there that hasn't seen it, it's got a handle on one side like a little suitcase. And initially I was a little confused because it looked like the way the box is put together that there were 2 lids. I was like, why would you put 2 lids on this, but one of them is glued on or fastened on, and the other is just like a shoebox lid? It's got a big overlap and you slide it on. The one quibble I have about the box is, if you're holding it by the handle, if you tilt it just a little bit in the direction of the actual lid, and you can't really tell which side is which just looking at it, the lid will slide off. It's loose enough that it'll slide off and the parts will come out. So I'm going to have to get some kind of tie or something if I ever want to carry it by the handle, or just carry it like a regular box. Here's the top, and carry it with the top part up. But that's a quibble. But that was a little. It was interesting. The box, I thought the way the box looked was very interesting, looking like that had 2 lids and it had a handle to carry it. It's a good concept for sure, and it had a little cardboard slip over with the name on it, but that's not tight either. It slides right off. In fact, I don't even know where it is. I don't know what happened to it since I opened it. But yeah, they are gorgeous hexes, but you're right. You could take Settlers of Catan. In fact, that would be fantastic for a solo campaign, or even just for helping if you wanted to build like a campaign map for a war game, some kind of randomization, just pulling Settlers of Catan hexes out of a bag, like the bag they provide with the toolkit, to just randomize your terrain as you go. that would be good. That would be good for those things, and that's a great thing about I think the gaming hobby is being able to repurpose things and use existing templates and games and rob them for parts. I know it's something that I think that people who create games for a living do all the time. They have all their games. They just start pulling parts from them and putting them together in different ways. And it's always good to use the resources you have. If you don't have the money to buy a kit, and right now it's not available, this Hex kit is not available for purchase right now. If you don't have it, or if you only could buy maybe the PDFs, you could use some existing board games you have and put them together and use it that way. But that's a great thought, Rich. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate that. Since I used RPG a day to generate some little stories within the campaign world and the solo campaign I'm playing, I thought I'd talk a little bit about kind of what I've established about the world before it even before the scenario of the party challenging first level parties challenging a dragon, and how I evolved that into a campaign when I decided to make it a campaign. In order to give the party the best possible chance for what I thought at the time was going to be a one-shot versus the dragon, I wanted them to adventure a little bit up to the point where they earned enough XP just before one of them would be eligible to advance to second level. So it would be a first level party, but maybe randomly they would end up with some sort of magic items that would help them. And it ended up they did end up rolling up on the magic items table, getting some arrows +1 and a potion of invisibility, which helped them out. So with that goal in mind, I reasoned the dragon would be nesting in a hilly wilderness area somewhat near an outpost of some sort with some scattered settlements around. And based on those initial decisions, when I decided to turn this into a solo campaign, I established that the fort is the outpost is a fort guarding a large wall at the end of a mountain pass. And what I referred to as the dungeon, where the party adventured a little bit before they went after the dragon. And I've been referring to this as a keep throughout the campaign, because it's one of 6 structures between the fort and the nearest town, each about a day's march apart from each other. So from the fort to a day to each outpost, and then from the final outpost to the first real town. And they serve the purpose. Some of them were purpose built for this. They were picked for this location. Okay, this is a day's march from the last one, and so we're going to build one here. And some of them were pre-existing structures that were found and cleared out, or mostly cleared out, to serve that purpose. The Dragon's Cave, I ruled that it took the party several days of search to find the cave from the dungeon. They were looking for signs of the dragon. They went into the dungeon because they saw a lot of scoring, a lot of heat damage, scorching damage on the outside, and thought maybe someone inside would know where the dragon was, since obviously the dragon attacked someone in that location. And just in my head canon, they had some valets they had hired to keep watch on their stuff while they were adventuring and to manage their wagons and horses and stuff. And so those valets saw a sign of the dragon flying by and got them, and so they began searching just in that direction and checking for sightings. So it took them several days to find the Dragon's Cave from the dungeon, even though it ended up being about 2 days travel really for them once they got the actual distance. In terms of greater world building, I reasoned that the fort and the wall were built as protection from orc and goblin hordes crossing the mountains through a pass to ravage the human kingdom to the south. There had been a strong dwarven presence with dwarven clans in the mountains that had served for deterrence for a long time in this world, until one time there were consecutive forces of goblins and orcs, and so the dwarves were reduced enough that they didn't serve as a barrier of the second horde, and it got through to the human kingdom to raid, and it had to be stopped. And this combination awoke the humans to the threats to the north and to the opportunities for mining and exploring now that the dwarven presence had shrunk down. And part of this was just my idea that dwarves being a long-lived race, they wouldn't reproduce willy-nilly. So after an attack by some sort of a horde, it would take time for their numbers to replenish. So 2 hordes coming through almost consecutively would be too much for them to handle. So the humans built the fort and the wall with a town just inside of it, which I think I've referred to a few times as the King's Town, that was built to support and supply the fort. And as mines and settlements began to be established further north, a merchant's town sort of developed just outside the fort and the wall, so they wouldn't have that barrier of having to be cleared to go in and out through the wall to get to a town, to give them easier access. And also, sort of the burgeoning unofficial and criminal elements would have a place, sort of a base of operations. They wouldn't be beholden to being kept prisoner, essentially, where they could just be cut off from the outside world by the wall being, say, shut down. And the nomads I've had in my campaign are a group that had troubled the human kingdom, and it ended up migrating north kind of to retain their freedom, with the understanding that as long as they paid some tribute and helped protect settlements, they would have the option to peacefully return if the steppes of the north proved to be too dangerous. I also established in the lower foothills a self-appointed baron has established a castle near the first city in town, which I've been referring to in my head as Keystone Town or Keystone Village because of it being on a road coming out of the hills and meeting at a confluence of rivers, so it's in a very strategic and key location. Somewhere hidden in all this is a set of ruins protecting an ancient artifact, and I did a little RPG a day story blurb that kind of mentioned this. I mentioned it, Hayward's Organ, or the Organ of Hayward. It's from the artifact from the D&D guide. It's a large immovable artifact, which once a generation or so, some exceptional goblinoid or orc leader finds and uses to assemble a large group of warriors, multiple tribes united, and then they start trying to raid the south. This is based on the old idea of steppes being this constant barbarian generator that you get from some versions of history in our world, where barbarians on horses are constantly coming out and attacking, the more settled civilizations, the more urban and farming civilizations. I'm also toying with the idea of these ruins falling into more of the mythical underworld category, where it alters and moves around and morphs, and somehow generating rumors and legends and even maps that can lead someone or something to it. But as time goes by, or with each iteration, maybe it's in a different location, and it could be that even because of the power of the artifact, even the maps will warp to still be somewhat accurate to find it. And the party, as one of their treasures, they came across a map that the ogres had. It was part of the treasure, and instead of leading to a money treasure or magic treasure or combination hoard, I thought it would be neat if that would lead eventually to the artifact, but it would need to be deciphered and understood, and you'd have to find the key points within the area to locate it. So just something that they could quest for another day if they follow that path. So that's some of the background I've been operating under, some of the assumptions I've been operating with that I developed soon after deciding to turn what was supposed to be a one-off scenario into a campaign. So I hope you enjoyed this little piece of world building, and as I come up with more as the world develops, I'll continue to update and add that. If you like this as much, or in terms of, or better than, or less than, giving you more of an update of what the party is up to, or doing blow-by-blow combats, which is some other things I'm being done. Because I've been doing this lots of different ways. There's been world building. There's been just summarizing what the party's been doing. There's been blow-by-blow combats. Let me know what you like. I'd like to all of these things are going to happen anyway, but what I record and what I present is going to depend on what people like. Because this podcast is, I guess it's mostly for me. I started doing it because I wanted to do it, but I also want to hear what other people think. So there will be at the end of the podcast and in the show notes, there are various ways to contact me. Let me know. Give me a heads up that feedback doesn't have to be on the podcast if you don't want it to be, but I'd love to hear from you if you're listening. Thank you so much for listening. And now, more from my solo AD&D RPG campaign, Tales of the Dragon Slayers. This segment is going to be more about happenings in the world of the Dragon Slayers party and not the Dragon Slayers party themselves. One of the things I've been doing over the course of the adventure has been, of course, rolling random encounters. When the party has been split up, I would roll random encounters for the part of the party that was at the Dragon's Cave and the party that was traveling back and forth to the keep. And then once the keep had treasure in it, I would also roll random encounters for the keep to see if anything smart enough would be able to maybe find the secret door where they were stashing their treasure. And I tend to do this ahead of time after I figure out what the party's going to be doing for several days, so that just to get ahead and also have the opportunity to world build a little about why these random encounters are happening, what's going on in the area, and will that establish that there's a camp of some kind of creature here or some kind of creature that's moved into the territory that the party will have to deal with eventually, even if not at that moment. So I've still been rolling for the cave because there's still treasure at the cave that the party left behind, some silver pieces and some copper pieces. And in the most recent round of random encounters I rolled hill giants again. As we know, the party encountered hill giants at the cave before. They were hungry. They came at night. They were hungry, and they wanted to eat some of the party's horses, and the party went out and hunted for them and got them enough food that they left. So they've showed up again. So obviously they are established in the region somewhere that's near where the Dragon's Cave is. That was rolled up as another night encounter, and at noon the next day an encounter was rolled up for orcs, and we know there have been orcs coming into the area for a while now. So this brings up several questions. One, who are these orcs? Are they the remainder of the first group of orcs that the party just wiped out the last of in their new keep, the dungeon that they're cleaning out for their new keep? Or are they a different tribe of orcs? Because we had another tribe of orcs that showed up and got wiped out by a tornado. And since the hill giants are in the area and the orcs are in the area, what will the orcs be doing? What will the hill giants be doing? Will they encounter each other? The first thing that comes to mind is that the orcs, they're going to see that the dragon is there. The dragon body is there, what's remains of it. And they're going to investigate the cave because obviously if they're showing up at noon, orcs don't like daylight. They're going to be looking for a place for shelter. So they're going to find the treasure. So that treasure is pretty much, unless the party encounters these orcs again, is going to be out of reach because the orcs are going to take it. This is a band of orcs that's maybe moving in. That's another question. Is this just a band of orcs and maybe they won't be able to carry all the treasure, or is this a big group of orcs that's moving back into the area? So we should establish that first. Now, the entry in the monster manual says that they are 35% found in lair. So will they be making this a lair, and that their lair is 25% above ground, 75% of the time underground? The cave is not big enough for a whole group of orcs to live there, so this would have to be an above ground lair. So I'm just going to roll and see above ground. So first I'm going to roll to see if it's under the 35% to see if this is the whole group of orcs that's coming in and not just a marauding band here. And with a 11%, they're definitely moving into the area. So will they stay here, or will they take the treasure and try to move to an area that's more underground, more caves? Because we know the party explored the area looking for other caves to hide the treasure in, and they didn't really find anything that was suitable. So the orcs would have to move probably deeper into the hills, deeper into the mountains to find an area for an entire orc tribe to live in. So if it's under 25%, they're going to stay here. Some of them will be in the cave, probably the chief and his group, and then they'll build a palisade around it and build some dwellings there. And with a 4, they are going to stick around. So is this the same group as before? is this the Raging Snouts, the remainder of the Raging Snouts who had sent the part of the army earlier to try to look for the dragon to serve it. So I'm going to say it's 50-50 shot, because at this point they're going to be moving back into the area some way, one way or another. And with a 37%, it is the same group. So I'm going to roll for the number of orcs. The number of orcs is usually 30 to 300. We had 60 orcs come in earlier, so if the number I roll is more than 240, we're just going to cut it down to 240 and say that those 60, since it would max out at 300. And if it's not, if it doesn't come up more 240 or more, then we'll just say that that's the remainder of the band. And this time, instead of just rolling one die and multiplying it by 30, I've got a 10-sided die. I'm going to multiply the total by 3. I just think that'll be more fun. All right, so I probably should have done this off mic so I could count it up quicker. Oh, brother. All right, let's see. We'll pair them up. That's 10. That's 20. That's 35, 40, 45, 47. And 47 times 3, 40 times 3 is 120. 7 times 3 is 21, so 141. So that's 141 more orcs moving into the area. They're going to build a camp here. This is going to be where they're going to live. Now that raises the question, will they run into the hill giants? And I think it's definite they will, because the hill giants know the cave is there. They know the party live there, and if they're going to show up every once in a while, probably looking for food. So the question is, how long? Now, the last time the hill giants showed up to this location was 6 days previously. So we're going to say it could be potentially in that time frame. We'll say it could be a little longer, a little shorter. I'm going to roll a D12. D12 doesn't get enough love. I'm going to roll a D12. So they're going to show up in 11 days. So is that enough time for the orcs to build up their fortifications? That's a good question. So for that, I probably need to reference something. So I'm going to pause this and we will see. If you're not interested in a bunch of numbers and how many orcs we're going to have, how long it's going to take them to build stuff, you could probably end the podcast right now. Because that's probably what the rest of this part's going to be. A group of orcs escorting a train of carts, and this group would be traveling with a train of carts because they're moving into the area. They would have all their stuff with them. It's going to be 1 to 6 carts, and that's going to add to the number of orcs. So how many carts have they got? They've got 5. They've got 5 carts. All right, so that initial 140 orcs, and that is just the fighters there, fighting orcs. That doesn't include women and children, so to speak. So for each additional cart, there will be 10 more orcs. So that's another 50 orcs. So we're up to 190 orcs. And then it will be double the number of leaders and assistants, which is 1 leader and 3 assistants per 30 orcs. So 190 orcs, that'd be 6 groups of 30, full groups of 30. So 6 leaders and 18 assistants doubled. So that's going to be 12 leaders and 36 assistants. Plus there will be a sub-chief because this group is over 150. So we have a sub-chief and 3 to 18 guards with the sub-chief. So that's going to be 8, 10, 12 guards. Plus, since this is going to be where they're going to be living, they're going to have a chief. So that's a chief. And then 5 to 30 bodyguards. So we've got 13 and 6 more is 19. So 19 more bodyguards. And that will give us 190, 202, 220, 250, 253, 263, 283 of the fighting variety of the orcs, the fighting men of the orcs. 283 of those. Then they will have an additional 50% of that is female, so that's another 141. And then young equal to the number of men, so 283, for a grand total of 707 orcs moving in. Now, how many of these? We know that the party and their horses could live together in the cave. It was little close quarters, but there's enough room for a huge ancient dragon. So let's say that the chief and his bodyguards and their women and some of their children will fit in the cave. So you're going to have to come up with another housing for another 650 orcs or so. We're going to say that the chief, sub-chief, and their guards will remain on guard during the process of building the village, and that, say, roughly half the remaining orc males will have to spend time hunting to provide food for the group. So that will leave the remaining half to be able to do the actual building, and they'll probably swap out back and forth all that. But that will be a crew of basically from a general group of 240, roughly 120 will be building, while the other 120 will be hunting. According to the Dungeon Master's Guide, well, let's go to the Monster Manual first. Monster Manual says that the above ground villages will be protected by a ditch and rampart. Those are earth. That's an earthen mound, essentially, rampart, packed earth, and a log palisade on top, and have from 1 to 4 watchtowers and a single gate. So let's see how many watchtowers they're going to have, because they'll probably anchor this stuff on the cave, so they may not need as many. Oh, we're going to have 4. We're going to have 4 towers. So 4 towers. And we'll also have a catapult and ballista for each 100 male orcs, round to the nearest 100. We're going to call it 3. 3 of each. 3 ballista and 3 catapults. Now we'll go to the Dungeon Master's Guide. First, we've got to build the wooden huts to house the roughly 650 orcs. Stone construction takes roughly a week per 10-foot cubic section. Wood construction take 1/2 the time. So half a week to build each 10-foot cubic section. Figure each orc needs about 10 cubic feet of space in whatever kind of huts or buildings that they're building. That'll give us 6,500 cubic feet of space. Those will be in 10 by 10 sections. So say it would be 6,500 square feet on the ground that it would take up, because the other 10 feet obviously is going to be vertical. And there'll be space in between the buildings. There'll be ways to get in and out of the cave. So say roughly 10,000, 12,000 square feet for the village proper to be encased in the ditch and the rampart and the wall, and with the towers, obviously, at the corners. So the wall itself is going to have to figure that it's anchored in the hill where the cave is. So you're going to have basically building 2 sides and then 1 longer side. That's going to be roughly 120 feet by 100 feet. So say the 2 shorter sides are 100 feet. The longer side is 120 feet. So that would be 320 feet of construction for the ditch and the rampart. Those could basically be constructed. The dirt's coming out of the ditch into the rampart, and then to build the palisade on top and the walkway on the palisade, and then the towers. So based on that, and looking at the figures from the DMG. 10 square feet of the wooden buildings takes half a week each. It doesn't say the size of the construction crew for building buildings. It does talk about a 3 to 4 man crew for earth excavation, so I'm going to work on that base. I'm going to assume on that basis that that same factor was considered for the buildings. So the 6,500, the 650 10 cubic foot sections at half a week each for 3 or 4 workers would be 325 weeks total if you only had 3 or 4. But we do have 240 workers, and those are, so if we divide that by 3 to 4, that would give us 30 to 40 work crews. Let's say 40 work crews. So that 325 weeks would be cut down to a little over 8 weeks. A little over 8 weeks to build the building. For the rampart and the digging the ditch and the rampart, it would, every crew can do 100-foot length in 6 weeks. So we're going to have a little over 3 of those, a little over 3 of the 100-foot sections. So divide that by our 40 crews. So a total of 18, a little over, call it 20 weeks with 40 crews. That'd be another half week for the ramparts and the ditch. And then the palisade on top. Each 100-foot section is basically the same wood you would be putting into a 10-foot cubic area, as long as it's 10 feet high, and that's what the palisade is listed as in the DMG. 100 feet, 10 feet high for each section. So that's another half week for a crew for each 100 feet. So that'd be a half week, a little over half week for 3 crews total. So for the number they have, they could get that done essentially a day. And then if you add in the walkways, which they refer to as wooden hoardings in the DMG, it's a 10-foot section per day. We're looking at 320 10-foot sections divided by 40 work crews is going to be 4 days. So roughly another week to finish the palisade and the walkway around it after doing everything else. If you factor in probably a full week, also factoring in building the ballistas and the catapults. So if you add it all up, the defenses are only going to take about a week and a half, which is about as much time as they have before the hill giants show up. And I think the orcs will prioritize the defensive sections before they start building the housing. They just kind of take shade under trees and rotate through the cave to stay out of the sun as much as they can during the days. So it'll just be a matter of when will the hill giants show up again? What time of day? Will they be there when the hunting parties are out? Will they be there when the hunting parties are back? But I think the defenses will be complete by the time they show up. So this could be interesting in 11 days when the hill giants return and the orcs are there at the cave and they've built their defenses, and what's going to happen then. So that will be an interesting scenario, I think, that will come up in the future. Exciting. I love that kind of stuff. All right, I hope somebody enjoyed this. I don't know. That was a lot of numbers and a lot of me looking up stuff and throwing numbers out there, but I think it all makes sense. I think it all works. And I think it set up an interesting scenario in the world that's beyond what the party's doing, kind of like what happened with the brigands and the nomads. And more to come. I think there should be much more to come in this world as it continues to develop. So I'm excited. I hope you're excited. If you are, let me know. If you're not, let me know. The ways to contact me will be right at the end of the episode here, and they are also in the show notes. So thank you for listening. The opening music of this podcast is Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late Night Radio, both by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Thank you for listening to Phantom Thoughts. I would love to hear your feedback. You don't have to be part of the show. If you want to contact me and let me know, hey, these are for your eyes only. I just wanted to give you thoughts, ideas, response, and it's really for your eyes or ears only. That's absolutely fine. I'd love to hear from you either way. So just let me know when you contact me. I don't want to be part of the show. There are lots of different ways you can contact me. You can send me an email at phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. And that can be a regular email, or you can attach an audio file to it. You can use the message button on my podcast site on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/phantom thoughts. You can contact me via my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. You can contact me via SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/phantom thoughts. You can contact me on Discord, The Pink Phantom. All this contact information is listed in the show notes of every episode. And thank you for those who call in. Thank you for those who don't call in. I appreciate you listening and hope you'll listen again next time. Until then, I hope you have a great day.